Hello everyone, my name is Vanessa Camilleri and today I would like to take you through a short lecture about the power of learning through games. This lecture is part of the training workshops for the Erasmus Plus project Creative SDGs, embracing the Sustainable Development Goals through the creative arts. This project addresses the United Nations 2030 Sustainable Development Goals, the SDGs, focusing on three in particular: life below water, quality education, and gender equality. The website for the project can be accessed at http://csdg.eu/. Now, basically, one of the questions that we have asked ourselves in the project is, have you ever observed a person playing a video game? Have you ever seen the intense range of emotions, the engagement, and the focus players experience as they play? This was one of the driving questions for our project, the Creative SDGs project. And as you can see from the website, these are some of the games that we have created during this project, which we will return back to in a short while. The reason is because of these questions. Can we use games to really pass on certain messages? Can we use games to harness the power that these games have in order to change people's attitudes, behaviors towards these sustainable development goals? Hence CSDGs. So how can we define digital games? Well, digital games can be defined as highly interactive forms of media that put players in control of their own experiences. The subject matter and the storylines present in games are quite diverse, and they provide constant feedback and allow players to learn through both their successes and their failures. Here you can see images of people playing games, maybe immersed virtually using VR headsets, or even playing on computers and PCs. You can see the range of emotions on their faces, and this is reflected through the experiences that the players are going. So how can we use those experiences to bring about learning? Learning is not necessarily digital and academic content, but learning in terms of behavior, in terms of attitudes, in terms of skills that they might gain and acquire. So I started my son, Sam, playing at age 2. It was first, Dora the Explorer. Very quickly he was learning the sounds and the words and navigating using the mobile device. Eventually he moved to Angry Birds, Fruit Ninja, Star Wars, Lego, and of course Minecraft. He shifted from simply playing to what is defined as modding, or rather creating. He kept exploring, trying his hand at game design, using Unity, thinking of the games he likes playing and the games he could eventually design. He used Scratch and Code.org to code whilst playing games, and in the meantime he was growing. 7 years, 8 years of age. Today, he's 12, he plays all games. I don't push or worry about what experiences he is making. Of course, something that I follow is that I check the games he plays. I check the rating, which in my opinion is an important factor to consider. And like every other parent, I do complain when I feel he's exceeding the screen time he should be subjected to. But I could see, through his growth, that the experiences he was making were very much exploratory type of experiences, and he started shifting and developing his skills more without me having to tell him that he needed to learn this to be able to do that, or without me giving him handouts, or without me having to give him lessons or lectures. He was doing it because he wanted to master not just one game, but several games, and all these games had different skills attached to them. And I could see this growth, this development. Of course, one cannot let something like this get out of control, because there always needs to be some sort of control, some sort of direction, some sort of guidance. And I'm there to provide that guidance. But let's go back to thinking about some of the experiences that Sam has built around him, and other children as well, and which I define as stealth learning. That means you're learning not explicitly, but almost tacitly. It's kind of tacit knowledge that you acquire, tacit skills that you acquire through the games. What we are increasingly seeing are players who would develop skills such as problem solving, such as communication, such as perseverance, such as strategic planning, such as information processing, such as adaptability, only to name a few. Of course, we don't give these players certificates. Most often we don't even know that these players have these skills. Sometimes the players themselves don't know that they have or have been acquiring these skills whilst they are playing games. But research and studies indicate that they do. It's a matter of harnessing these skills. It's a matter of bringing these skills out in the open, and it's a matter of making the players aware that they are building these skills and how they can use these skills in the real life, how they can use these skills to move these skills from the game world, from the virtual world or from the digital world into the real world. Okay, how they can use these skills to change and adapt their behavior to the problems which they need to solve at hand. Now, this is not to say that a 12-year-old child playing Call of Duty or Squid Games is necessarily going to achieve all these skills, but with the adequate guidance, with the adequate choice of games, and the diversity in the games targeted for the right ages and within the right directions, then yes, these skills are not only achievable, but they can also be strengthened. Now, try to envision a scenario where members of the digital generation play to learn. They would take risks, work productively alone or in groups. They would strive to improve. They would strive to focus on a single task for an extended period of time. They would be able to fail without any of the stigmas attached to failure. They are able to persevere through the challenges, and they work toward both short-term and long-term goals. And they learned through experiences rather than, absorbing these dry, unconnected facts. And, the digital generations are doing this whilst having fun during the process. Now, we might not be aware, but today's generations, or rather, the children who are growing up within this environment, are actually quite expert at analyzing gameplay. They're also experts at interpreting storylines and at ingesting raw game data. Probably they don't know it, and we don't know it, and we are not aware of it. The issue is how to bring all these out to light. Now, if parents and educators can take advantage of gaming's popularity and positive attributes during learning, then education could become a really positive journey for our children. Now, outside of schools, people are playing hours of video games each week. Whilst playing these games in their spare time, they're extremely focused. They take on all the challenges, they work collaboratively at times, they solve problems, and they receive instant feedback and gratification, and ingest and retain a large amount of information quickly with amazing accuracy during recall. Now, if these attributes can be transferred to the real world, then what we're having is a generation that is quite ready to take on the world. But we are not at this point. So our job is that of actually finding what's happening, okay? Giving the right guidance, giving the right direction, and extracting the skills these people are building and helping them implement these skills in the real world. Now, I'd like us to watch this video whilst, during this presentation. And this video gives slightly more in-depth information to the specific skills that video games can help develop.
The way we tell stories has not really changed since Aristotle defined the rules of tragedy about 2,500 years ago. According to him, the role of storytelling is to mimic life and make us feel emotions. And that's exactly what storytelling as we know it has done very well since then. But there is a dimension of life that storytelling could never really reproduce. It is the notion of choices. Choices are a very important part of our lives. We, as individuals, are defined by the choices we make. Some of our decisions can have very significant consequences and totally change the courses of our lives. But in a play, a novel, or a film, the writer makes all the decisions in advance for the characters. And as the audience, we can only watch passively the consequences of his decisions. As a storyteller, I've always been fascinated with the idea of recreating this notion of choices in a fiction. My dream was to put the audience in the shoes of the main protagonists, let them make their own decisions, and by doing so, let them tell their own stories. Finding a way to achieve this is what I did in the past 20 years of my life. Today, I would like to introduce you to this new way of telling stories, a way that has interactivity at its heart. Rather than, exposing the theory behind it, which could have been kind of abstract and be probably a little bit boring, I thought it would be a great opportunity to do a little experiment. I would like you, the people here in TED, to tell your own story. So I came with an interactive scene that we are going to play together. I've asked Vicky, hello Vicky, to control the main character for us. And your role, you the audience, will be to make the choices. So Vicky and I don't know what's going to happen because it will all be based on your decisions. So this scene comes from our next game called Detroit Become Human. And we are in a near future where technology made possible the creation of androids that look exactly like human beings. So we are in the shoes of this character called Connor, who is an android, and he can do very fancy things with coins, as you can see. He has this blue triangle on his chest, as all androids do. And now Vicky's in control of this character. She can walk around, she can go anywhere, she can look around, she can interact with her environment, and now she can tell her own stories by making choices. So here we have our first choice. There's a fish on the ground. What should we do? Should we save it or should we leave it? Remember, we're under time pressure, so we'd better be fast. What should we do? Okay, let's save the fish. Here we go. Okay, we have an android who likes animals. Okay, let's move on. Remember, we have a hostage situation.
Please, you gotta save my little girl. Wait. You're sending an android?
All right, now. You need to go.
You can't do that. Why aren't you sending a real person?
Okay, she's not really happy. Her daughter has been taken hostage by an android, and of course she's in state of shock. So okay, now we can continue to explore this apartment. We see all the SWAT forces in place, but we need to find this Captain Allen first. That's the first thing we need to do. So again, We can go anywhere. Vicky is still in control of the character. Let's see. Oh, I think this is Captain Allen. He's on the phone.
Captain Allen, my name is Connor. I'm the android sent by CyberLife.
It's firing at everything that moves. It already shot down 2 of my men. We can easily get it, but they're on the edge of the balcony. If it falls, she falls.
Okay, now we need to decide what we want to ask the captain. What should be our choice? Deviant's name, Deviant's behavior, emotional shock?
Has it experienced an emotional shock recently?
I haven't got a clue. Does it matter?
I need information to determine the best approach.
Okay, a second choice. Maybe we can learn something. What should we choose? Okay, deviant behavior.
Been behaving strangely before this.
Listen. Saving that kid is all that matters.
Okay, we are not going to learn anything from this guy. I mean, we need to do something. Okay, let's try to go back in the lobby. Oh wait, there's a room over there on your right, Vicky. I think maybe there's something we can learn here. Oh, there's a tablet. Let's have a look. That was just one way of playing the scenes, but there are many other ways of playing it. Depending on the choices you make, we could have seen many different actions, many different consequences, many different outcomes. So that gives you an idea of what my work is about as an interactive writer, where a linear writer needs to deal with time and space. As an interactive writer, I need to deal with time, space, and possibilities. I have to manage massive tree structures where each branch is a new variation of the story. I need to think about all the possibilities in a given scene and try to imagine everything that can happen. I need to deal with thousands and thousands of variables, conditions, and possibilities. As a consequence, where a film script is about 100 pages, an interactive script like this is between 4,000 and 5,000 pages. So that gives you an idea of what this work is about, but I think in the end, the experience is very unique because it is the result of the collaboration between a writer creating this narrative landscape and a player making his own decisions, telling his own story, and becoming the co-writer, but also the co-actor and the co-director of the story. Interactive storytelling is a revolution in the way we tell stories. With the emergence of new platforms like interactive television, virtual reality, and video games, it can become a new form of entertainment and maybe even a new form of art. I am convinced that in the coming years, we will see more and more moving and meaningful interactive experiences created by a new generation of talents. This is a medium waiting for its Orson Welles or its Stanley Kubrick, and I have no doubt that they will soon emerge and be recognized as such. I believe that interactive storytelling can be what cinema was in the 20th century, an art that deeply changes its time. Thank you.
So this was a very interesting excerpt from an example of how actually games can also be used as forms of storytelling. The power that these games carry with them. You might be telling a story, you might be reading a story, you might be acting out a story. The games themselves have the power to augment the emotions of the players, to augment the feelings that the players exhibit during that particular time. But also you can start seeing what sort of learning we're driving here. Learning as in maybe the skill that is needed to communicate with someone, or the skill that is needed to gain the right information, to process the right information, to analyze a situation, to maybe try to solve a problem. In this brief excerpt, we still hadn't arrived to the sort of problem solving part, although there was that part where Captain Allen was not really responsive, so we had to find an alternative solution to the goal we had. A game is usually driven by the series of goals that a person has to go through. Now, the more interactive the game is, then the more action the player needs to take. And this is where we want our people to be. People who take action, who do not just sit and lie back. And especially when we're talking about, creating sustainability or supporting sustainability, we want actors, we want people who take that action, we want people who change their behavior. And this is why games are an excellent form of media that can foster such behavior. Of course, we need to think about good design of games. Maybe not all games would lend themselves to the same objectives, but this is up to us, sometimes as game specialists or experts, sometimes as game designers, sometimes as educators, to try and filter out the right games for the right purposes in order to elicit the right skills. So when it comes to games, today we see that games are much more accessible. They're free, they're cheaper to play, there are the expensive console games, and also the ones that are free. But people who want to play diverse games can find so many points of access for them. Let's have a look at this video. Here there's this video, Playing Without a Sound. Here we're seeing this young child playing Minecraft, trying to build something from Minecraft. He's conversing with a mentor, actually. Now, playing these digital games is an immensely popular form of entertainment. Now, simple real-world observations can attest to this. We've all seen restaurants that, used to hand out tablets for children to use. Nowadays, it seems like an overrated investment since most of the patrons will possess mobile devices anyway. And we've all been through an experience where either we as parents or we see other parents hand out mobile devices to young children so that we can either work or just enjoy some free time with the adults. Now, these children, these members of the always-on generation, are growing up with hundreds of ways to produce and consume information using these different media. The digital games of today are visually more appealing, they contain better storylines, and are developed using better technology. They encourage both single and team gameplay and are easier for new players to adopt than classic games from the past. And today's digital games are products of an incredibly powerful and awe-inspiring market that has helped spawn a gaming culture. We're talking about a lucrative gaming industry that churns out billions of dollars in profits. Now here we're seeing this young child, must be 7-8 years old, who is busy at creating something within the world of Minecraft. Now most of the adults who I know wouldn't be able to get to where this young child is. And this young child has learned not with the help of his parents or with the help of a handout or with the help of guidelines or tutorials, but he has learned this through exploration, through experimentation, through, failing and retrying, through perseverance. I mean, the perseverance it takes for somebody to actually go through this and build something is quite inspiring. So this is about the games, but we also need to think what we as adults, as guides, as designers, as educators, as people giving directions to the youths, what we need to think about is what we want to achieve when we decide to use games as media to help young people learn. I think that the most important scope of game-based learning is in its design for learning. What designs do we have for our young people to learn? Are we into allowing free exploration with this idea of stealth learning, which is not controlled in any way? Meaning we let young people and children learn whatever they can from the games we propose? Or are we into controlling what sort of content the young people want to learn? So we start with those questions. We, as educators, we as designers, we start with the questions of what do we want to achieve? That people play is a fact, that games may have hidden skills that we can exploit is a fact based in research and studies. That the games, bring about intense form of emotions, again, is a researched issue, and research shows that yes, in many people we have a variety range of emotions, and that games can help build a number of diverse skills, again, is a matter that has been well researched and well documented. So those are facts, and we know those. But those alone do not serve to reach the purposes we have, because first of all, we need to define what purposes we have. Okay, when we have defined those purposes, when we have defined the designs that we have for learning, then yes, we can move on. Now, before we decide on these, we also need us as educators, as designers, we need to understand exactly what we mean by play, what do games really imply, and the differences between what we want to achieve in terms of whether we want to do some gamification or whether we're after game-based learning. So those are terms and understandings that we need to have clearly before we can actually ask some questions and identify the sort of games we want these questions to be answered with. So let's start with the idea of play. Now, play is a highly creative process. It uses both the body and the mind. Now, its definition is flexible and may or may not involve goals. We can describe play as a spontaneous and active process in which thinking, feeling, and doing can flourish. When we play, we are free to be inventive and creative. And in play, everything is possible, and most often reality is disregarded and imagination takes over. Now, there are various learning philosophies and various educational theories and theorists, such as Jean Piaget, Erik Erikson, Lev Vygotsky. They all recognize the value of children who use play for self-teaching and its important role in a child's cognitive development. Now, as parents and as educators, our role is to provide our children with more opportunities for play. Now, that is play, okay? Very highly creative process. Now, what is a game? Do we play in games? Well, have you ever tried to define what a game is? Now, we know games come in many varieties and genre. Now, games can be single or multiplayer, they can be collaborative, they can be competitive. Now, games can be defined as systems in which players would engage in an abstract challenge. The game itself is defined by rules. A game is interactive and gives feedback, most often immediate feedback, that would result in a quantifiable outcome, often eliciting an emotional response. So you can see that games are very structured. Of course, you can have an element of play in a game, but the game itself is very structured and is often guided by rules, and it does elicit some form of response, emotional response in the users. Why? Because the users are interacting constantly with the system itself. Now let's break these characteristics further. Okay, so when we talk about challenge, what are we talking about? In a game, the challenge would be the problem or the scenario presented to the player to overcome. Now, this problem is bound by rules, okay? These are the structures, the boundaries, the freedoms provided to players during gameplay. And the players need to interact. Now, this interactivity would be the actions or the processes players undergo during gameplay. Every action is always followed by some sort of feedback in reaction to the player's action. Now, feedback can provide rewards for successful gameplay or consequences for mistakes. That's when players fail. And that's when players get up and start again and learn and relearn actions that would lead to success. So the feedback is a constant loop, and the feedback is a huge, important part of the success of gameplay. Now, within the gameplay, there's often conflict. There would be in-game challenges, there would be frictions, there would be opposition between the players, there might be the game system, there might be different rules that change, okay, throughout. So there is always this kind of challenge that's provided during the game. Why? Because one theory which we always refer to during game design is this theory of flow. What we want to achieve in players, in people playing games, is that level of emotional response where the player is neither too bored because this is too easy for him, nor too frustrated because this is too complex for him. So we want to achieve a flow, an in-between balance between boredom and frustration, between enjoyment and between excitement, between finding things a little bit difficult, but then there's the joy of overcoming that difficulty and moving on to the next level. Okay, if it's too easy, then it becomes too boring. If it's too difficult, then it becomes like, okay, I give up and I move on to another game. So we need to achieve this flow, this balance between what can be done and, what am I learning and how am I applying what I'm learning to achieve a certain success. And this is the goal and the outcome, the success, okay? It's a representation of the player's desired result and how the player reaches that. Sometimes the outcomes would be the win, the lose, the draw, okay? Usually it is the goal that the player sets and how he or she manages to achieve it. And then we come to gamification, and many people find difficulties in discerning and differentiating between gamification and game-based learning. Now, gamification can be defined, it's also known as gameful design, and it's an emerging field of practice that uses game design and mechanics and injects them into non-gaming situations. Let's have an example. Have you ever, especially if you're, have you ever played McDonald's Monopoly game? Okay, in this game, okay, buying a burger or a milkshake from McDonald's becomes a game. But it's not really, isn't it? What happened with McDonald's is that they created a system-based construct that would entice players to buy more food for the opportunity to win $1 million. Now, if you belong to Starbucks rewards game or rewards program or any of the outlets that serve, loyalty members with points, okay, or they give you a stamp, okay, for every latte or coffee that you buy, okay. What happens is that after a number of stamps, you get rewarded with a free drink, okay, or with a free item, or maybe with some discounts on the items that you purchase. And these are consumer programs that use gamification. So we take a situation that's not a game, going to Starbucks, ordering a coffee or a latte, or going to Costa and ordering coffee, or going to purchase at different fashion outlets and getting points in return. Okay, so this is really not a game. You're just purchasing something, you're consuming products, but these outlets have turned it into a kind of a reward, kind of a game that will give you points based on what you have done. And with increased games, you get a prize. Okay, you get this success, this result. Okay, now gamification would have many structural elements. I've mentioned points and scores and badges, but this is not just within the classroom. They may include, for example, creating a compelling storyline or a narrative. CSDGs uses storytelling as one of its main driving elements, because powerful stories draw us in. When used in the classroom, gamification becomes a means of immersing students into an engaging narrative. Classroom imagination and storytelling spawn a new and exciting mental construct. Students are transported from their classrooms into a storyline. Now, the content, the assignments, the assessments, even the classroom procedures, they all take on the attributes of the storyline. So that's also an example of gamification. And then we've got autonomy. In a game, players receive a great deal of power to make decisions, as we saw in the video that we've seen, that we've shared before, to make decisions, to succeed, to fail by their own choices. Now, educators must look for ways for placing the powerful decisions in the hands of their learners. Mastery of skills. Games allow players to experience them over and over again, to master skills or review content. So repetition becomes a very powerful learning strategy. Immediate feedback. Games provide both positive and negative feedback in a timely manner. This fast-paced response allows the players to adapt quickly and overcome the learning challenges. Again, examples of gamification mechanics that can be somehow extracted and injected into the classroom. Collaboration. Games promote teamwork and community, and the individual needs of the players are replaced by a combined focus on common goal. And speaking of teamwork, there's also the element of competition. Individual players or teams may face conflict, may face challenges, and this is also an example of how gamification can be injected in a learning environment. Problem solving. We've mentioned this over and over again. Games provide problems for the player to solve, constant problems for the player to solve. Now, the problems cannot be too easy or the player will lose interest. If the game is too hard, then the players will become frustrated and give up. The secret is, moving with the flow, okay? Creating this balance between something that's too easy, something that's too difficult. So creating levels, maybe depending on the level of ability demonstrated by the group of young people in front of you, okay, and adjusting the difficulty level depending on that particular group of people who is in front of you. Differentiated learning experiences. Games can progress from easy challenges to harder ones. As I am observing right now, people are different, and games can adapt to the level of ability. They can offer the right level of challenge based on the current skill set or ability of the player. And then we've got the use of badges and the use of points and leaderboards. Games often provide players with data to determine how they are progressing. Sometimes it's always fun, even a running app like Garmin running app, they provide badges, and you see people comparing the badges they got. Oh, I got a badge for running the fastest mile, or I got a badge for running during Halloween, and that's a trick or treat badge. And these kinds of badges, sometimes they provide additional motivation and additional engagement, especially in between people. Sometimes they work, sometimes with a different audience they might be more of a deterrent. deterrent. So sometimes people will say, oh, she has more badges than me, and so it sort of like serves as the motivating factor rather than a motivating factor. Sometimes it also may give rise to some sort of bullying, especially if persons, are always on top on the leaderboards, and there are persons who might not be at the very top or might be at the bottom. So we have to be careful here. People make the mistake of equating gamification with the simple use of badges, of points, and of leaderboards. I don't think we should make that mistake. As you can see here, there are a number of elements that are equated with gamification. And within the classroom setting, we have the choice of using all of them, bits of them, one of them, two of them. Basically, we have to design and construct our own context within the teaching we are trying to achieve. Now, when it comes to gamification and game-based learning, these are not the same. Okay, although each of these strategies has the potential to invigorate learning, game-based learning and gamification are distinctly different approaches to teaching, learning, and assessment. Game-based learning involves the player learning or reviewing content or developing skills as they play a game. Okay, it's a set game, and the skills are usually like kind of stealth skills, hidden skills. You're using the game, okay, to help the player, to help the young person, to help the child develop a particular skill set. In gamification, what you're doing is this: taking the classroom content, taking a curriculum, taking a syllabus, taking whatever, an academic content, and injecting bits and pieces of it, maybe a competition between the teams, maybe a plot, okay, or a narrative, and getting children to follow the narrative during which you are teaching a particular academic content, let's say an English lesson or math lesson, okay? Or maybe you are having people collaborate together and solving problems or solving certain challenges together, okay? Now that would be gamification. So there are all these bits and pieces of game mechanics inserted into your classroom teaching. So here is a little bit of a picture that shows some differences between gamification and game-based learning. Okay, when it comes to gamification, we see the game components. So you're adding game components to your course. You're introducing game mechanics to a non-game setting to encourage engagement and motivation. And you usually or may include some sort of rewards, some sort of points. It's very flexible, so there's no designated path in how to create gamification or how to gamify your course. And it allows for choice, as it is not always a linear learning path. When it comes to game-based learning, first of all, there are set objectives, and you're meeting them. Learning becomes the result of playing the game. You can have both customized and both off-the-shelf games, that is, games that are readily available. And usually the focus of the game is that of solving a problem. You can have tactile, like physical games or digital games, and they may include some sort of simulations to allow for greater experience of learning. But what is it in games that makes them so fun, sometimes even addictive to people? And what is there in this that can be exploited for learning? So we've seen the power. We've dealt with some of the terms, key terms and definitions, and maybe started getting ideas about how we can implement games or gamification methods into how to make what we want to, the behavioral change or the attitude that we're targeting possible. But what is it? What happens? Why are games such powerful media? Why would introducing game elements into my content somehow have much more power than just, doing the normal lecture thing? And here we see like what happens in the brain when people are playing games and when they are learning. We term this as brain-based learning. So learning during the gaming experience provides information and experiences in a manner that promotes this brain-based learning. Now, first, gameplay accesses many regions of the brain associated with learning. When gamers engage in gameplay, they will receive information through their eyes into their occipital lobes. Now, this region of the brain is associated with visual perception, with color recognition, with object moving, with reading, with comprehension, and also with depth perception. Research has also shown that fast-paced action games can retrain the visual cortex to gain a better understanding of the visual information it receives. Now, video gameplay also augments grey matter in brain areas crucial for spatial navigation, for strategic planning, for working memory, and for motor performance. Now, as humans, we are all inherently visual learners, with the exception of individuals with visual disabilities. The human eyes are nature's greatest cameras. They collect many gigabytes, of data, of information every second. Now, human eyes contain like 70% of our body's sensory receptors. And this allows them to process the meaning of images 60 times faster than that of text. So you see how important visual information is. The digital game experience uniquely accesses visual learners because in most games it is the main method of information transfer to the player. The player is actually seeing what's going on. Now, additional human senses and brain regions are extensively accessed during digital gameplay as well. Information received or transmitted through the sounds are processed in and routed through the temporal lobes, which are associated with auditory processing, with language comprehension, with memory, and with speech. Now, digital games do this amazing job of transmitting high quality, highly expressive, realistic, and multisensory experiences. We're talking about sight, we're talking about sound, we're talking about touch, even through the consoles, maybe the vibrations. And most likely in the near future, we're going to see games that will provide also sensory experiences of smell and taste. They provide gamers with experiences more immersive than watching a video or listening to audio. It's recorded and it's a fact. Gamers would engage in these virtual worlds and their appetites to learn and explore are quite ravenous. Now, in the past, the brain was believed to be composed of an unalterable, unchanging structure. However, the scientific community has discovered that repetitive experiences can alter the brain's structure and actually rewire it. It's called neuroplasticity, and it's the process of ongoing reorganization and restructuring of the brain in response to intensive inputs and constant stimulation. Now, I've been going on, about how the positive side of games. Now, what happens when young people play too much video games, are overstimulated by all these multi-sensory inputs coming in at them, is that the brain in its ongoing reorganization and restructuring can somehow be rewired in a way that may cause more harm than positive. This is why our role as educators, as people in charge of young people, comes in. We have to guide, direct. We have to make sure that we do not lose control over something that fundamentally has a lot of good potential and shows a great power for learning in a positive way. So video games can be able to provide these repetitive situations. They can provide experiences across the different game types, across different platforms, across different genres. Sometimes we get worried when people get stuck on a single game and they play that game over and over again for interminable number of hours. And this is because the game the player would not be exposed to all the different stimuli that can arise from all the different games. So we have to also control the amount of or we have to teach our young people to control the sort of games they play and the variety and the genre they play. Because they provide constant stimulation for students to learn using multiple forms of sensory input, such as auditory, such as visual, and even kinesthetic. So what I'm saying is there is potential, but we definitely need to be there to play a role in harnessing that potential, extracting that potential, extracting what happens in the brain and direct it towards the right use. Now, the challenging nature of games also makes learning with them particularly rewarding. So we've spoken about what happens in the brain, but there's something else that goes on. Dopamine is a neurotransmitter and is associated with intense pleasure. And usually this is released as a reward in response to conquering a challenge, such as making a prediction, such as making a choice, such as taking some action and receiving positive feedback to that it was correct. Now, gamers usually want to repeat this neurotransmitter release, so they advance through more challenging experiences. Unfortunately, again, if a challenge is too easy, then the dopamine release doesn't occur and the player would lose interest in the game. When the challenge is at the right state, then the dopamine keeps releasing, and this is where it becomes addictive for the gamer. This is where the gamer can't stop because there's so much release of dopamine over there. The pleasure is quite intense and the brain is telling the player, like, repeat this because this is good, this is making you feel good, keep on repeating this, keep on playing this game. So digital games have the potential to provide powerful learning experiences to the gamer's brain. They would transmit all this visual, this auditory, this tactile information in a compelling manner. So more regions of the brain are accessed during gameplay. They provide the information in a manner that helps restructure and even retrain the human brain neurologically. Now, gameplay also offers the opportunities for the brain to reward perseverance, to reward tenacity, and to reward learning through conquering challenges with a pleasurable neurochemical release. Again, the issue here is we can use this to target our objectives, our driving objectives for what the young people can learn, if uncontrolled. Okay, this is where it can, go in a different direction, go at a tangent to what we have planned. So, what has research concluded about how learning occurs through games? Well, first we discuss knowledge gains. Research has shown that serious games, as in games that are designed specifically for a training purpose, have been found to be more effective for knowledge and cognitive skills than learning in the classroom or by drills. We've seen games that have been used with surgeons to train surgeons in, for example, certain operation procedures or even communication skills. And these have been proven, again through empirical research, to have been more effective than just textbook learning. The simulations that these games provide the users help them build new learning experiences. So when we design serious games, we're also simulating the real world, and this helps the brain associate what they are doing in the virtual world to the real world experience, building new memories within the brain. Another reason is student motivation. Research has shown that with specific games, student motivation can increase in a way that would engage learners more with the content. Focus and attention is another key learning principle that games can support if used well and if used wisely. And of course, we have to consider the skills that games can enhance and support, again, if the right games are used for the right purposes. So this gets us to see SDGs, embracing the Sustainable Development Goals through creative arts. As we mentioned before, the project addresses Sustainable Development Goals, 3 in particular: life below water, to conserve and sustainably use oceans, seas and marine resources for sustainable development; quality education, to ensure inclusive and equitable quality education and promote lifelong learning opportunities for all; and gender equality, to achieve gender equality and empower all women and girls. So the notion here is to use 3 creative art forms, those of digital games, storytelling and dance, in order to raise awareness of these global issues through innovative methods of learning whilst in an informal environment. Now, what I would like you to do from this particular lecture is to emerge with a list about your criteria for choosing and playing games. Think of these questions before you attempt to use game-based learning in your teaching. First of all, what learning principles would you like to teach? What are your driving points? What is your overall goal for what you're trying to teach to your class? Is it knowledge? Are you after cognition? Or are you after skill-based competencies? If it is knowledge, then the question is, can you actually teach this knowledge in a way that does not require use of games? Can you teach knowledge by talking, discussing, or maybe having a class activity? Or can't you teach knowledge in any other way rather than use this game? Sometimes we use games just for the sake of saying, oh, we have to include game-based learning because it's so good, because all the skills. It's not like that. If there is a way to teach something without the use of games, then the games become superfluous, and don't use them, because the people will realize that the games are there just for the sake of having games. Okay, so you have to have the right reason and the right purpose. And if it is knowledge build-up that I seek, do I really want game-based learning, or can I use gamification principles in my lessons? Let's say I have an educational visit. Can I gamify this visit to make it more interesting? Or, I can't do without the use of this game. I need students to play this game and then use this form of game and use briefing after the game to elicit or to make them aware of what happened in that game, to make them aware of what they did in that game, to make them aware of how they achieved a success in their game and what sort of skills they used to achieve that success in the game. Now, what about the games proposed by CSDGs? You can check them out on the website. And I've also shown you a small screenshot before, okay? But if I look at them, what knowledge or skills do I see them as contributing? Do they really integrate with what I wish my students to achieve? And also another question is, what would be the best context of use within or outside a class? A game's importance and a game's role can change completely if implemented in a different context. Okay, playing a game at home might not be as effective as playing a game at school, or playing a game at school can be very watered down rather than playing that same game at home. So maybe I require students to play a game for 3 weeks before they can understand the sort of skills before they can change their attitudes or before they can change their behaviors to something. Maybe playing a game just for 30 minutes is not good enough. So I have to understand this from the perspective of an educator and from the perspective of a designer or from the perspective of a guide. for educational visits. It's not just the game, it's all the package that goes with the game. And when I spoke about briefing, I think that briefing before playing a game and briefing after playing a game is very important. This is not just my thought or my opinion, even though I said I think. It's research. Research indicates that a game without, the right context, without the right package to it, can become very empty. People will not realize what they have learned by playing the game. This is where the role of the educator comes in. You need to direct the people playing, the players, the students, the children. You need to have them understand or become more aware of, what they have really played, what they have achieved, and what the meaning of the game really was. So just giving them the game like that is not enough. So you have to ask yourself, what sort of questions can I ask the students as a follow-up game as a follow-up to the gameplay, to evaluate the skills they have acquired? And you come up with a list of questions, really. And also there might be the possibility of tweaking gameplay to be able to better refine, to better direct the students to acquire the skills they need to possess. Sometimes you can just, alter a bit of the gameplay, even within set games. Sometimes maybe you want students to play in teams, even though the game is played as an individual player. So these little tweaks, here and there, can help you. For example, when played in a team, in a group of two, you might be targeting communication skills, or maybe alternative thinking. So critical thinking or parallel thinking, or solving problems in a different way. So these are important questions that you would need to think about, to write, to reflect on before you actually use games or use any other medium to help learning. Yes, games can be powerful learning tools or powerful learning media, but only if used in the right manner, because otherwise they're going to be rather shallow. And you will not reach the objectives, and you will just say, students will not be happy, and they will not give you the right feedback. So these are key questions, as I said, which as an educator and as an educational specialist, one needs to address to integrate the use of games, whether these are off-the-shelf games or whether they have been designed specifically for an educational concept or skills, such as the ones produced by CESDG, with any form of directed learning. Directed learning is key. Knowing your learning objectives is key. Knowing where you want to lead your audience, be it young or older audience, is very important, because that gives a sense of direction and a sense of purpose to gameplay. Thank you very much for joining me in this lecture, and I hope this has been useful for you.